The last transmission from Earth, you've doomed yourselves Part 1. First contact gone. Wrong Commander Jack Harris had seen many strange things in his 20 years of service. He had watched asteroids burn up in the atmosphere of Mars. He had seen ice volcanoes erupt on the moons of Jupiter. But nothing had prepared him for what appeared on his screen that morning. The Deep Space Monitoring Station hung quietly in orbit around Mars. It was a small station with a crew of only 40 people. Their job was simple. They watched the stars and listened for signals from distant places. For years, they had heard nothing but silence. That silence ended on a Tuesday. Jack was drinking his morning coffee when the alarm started screaming. Red lights flashed across every wall. His coffee cup floated away as he pushed himself toward the main control room. Other crew members were already there, their faces pale with shock. "What is it?" Jack demanded. Lieutenant Amy Cole pointed at the main screen with a shaking hand. "Ships, sir. Hundreds of them. They just appeared out of nowhere." Jack stared at the screen. She was right. Massive vessels hung in space near Earth's moon. They were shaped like long triangles, black as the void itself, and they were enormous. Each one was at least 5 miles long. There were more than 300 of them. "Are they responding to our signals?" Jack asked. "We've been broadcasting standard greeting messages," said Ben Carter, the communications officer. He was a young man with red hair and freckles. His hands moved quickly across his controls. No response. "They're ignoring us completely." Jack felt a cold weight settle in his stomach. In all the years humans had dreamed of meeting aliens, they had imagined many things. Friendly visitors, curious scientists, even hostile invaders. But they had never imagined being ignored like insects. On Earth, the world watched in wonder and fear. Governments called emergency meetings. Military forces went on high alert. Religious leaders spoke of signs and prophecies. Children pressed their faces against windows, hoping to catch a glimpse of the strange ships. The aliens made contact 12 hours later. But they did not contact humanity. Instead, they sent a transmission to somewhere far beyond human reach. Ben managed to intercept part of it and translate it using the station's computers. When Jack read the translation, his blood ran cold. The human species has been observed for 300 years. Their history shows a pattern of violence, conquest, and destruction. They have developed nuclear weapons. They have nearly destroyed their own planet. They have begun to spread beyond their homeworld. The Velthari High Council has reviewed all evidence and reached a decision. The human threat must be neutralized before they can spread further. Authorization for cleansing has been granted. Jack read the message 3 times. Each time, he hoped he had misunderstood. Each time, the words remained the same. "We have to warn Earth," he said, but they were already too late. The alien ships, the ones called Velthari, moved toward Earth with terrible purpose. Human military forces tried to stop them. Fighter jets and missiles rose to meet the invaders. They might as well have been throwing stones at the ocean. The Velthari did not use bombs or lasers. They used something far worse. Small pods fell from their ships and entered Earth's atmosphere. Millions of them rained down like silver seeds. When they hit the ground, they opened and released a fine gray mist. At first, nothing seemed to happen. People watched the strange mist drift through the air and wondered what it meant. Scientists rushed to collect samples. News reporters spoke excitedly about the historic moment. Then the dying began. Dr. Laura Mitchell was a scientist who studied alien life. She worked at Luna Base, a research station on Earth's moon. From there, she had a perfect view of her home planet. She watched through her telescope as the gray mist spread across the continents. Within 24 hours, plants began to wilt. Forests turned brown. Crops withered in the fields. Animals grew sick and weak. By the second day, people started dying too. The old and the young went first, then the healthy. The hospitals filled and overflowed. There were not enough doctors or medicines or beds. Laura stood at the observation window with tears streaming down her face. She had grown up in a small town in Kansas. She remembered running through wheat fields as a child. She remembered the smell of her mother's garden. Now she watched as everything she loved turned gray and died. Ben Carter stood beside her. He had intercepted another Vel-3 transmission. His voice was hollow when he spoke. They've sent a message to something called the Galactic Council. It says the human threat has been neutralized. They're telling everyone that the galaxy is safe now. Laura could not speak. She could only watch as the blue and green planet slowly became gray and lifeless. 90% of all life on Earth would be dead within 72 hours. 8 billion people. Countless animals. Forests that had stood for thousands of years. All of it gone. The Vel-3 fleet remained in orbit for 3 days. They watched to make sure their weapon had done its work. Then, without a word, they turned and flew away. They did not look back. They did not care about the screams or the prayers or the last desperate messages from the dying planet to them. Humanity was simply a problem that had been solved. But in their arrogance, the Vel-3 had made a terrible mistake. They had looked at Earth and seen all of humanity. They had not bothered to look at the Moon or Mars, or the distant stations floating in the darkness of space. Humanity was not dead. Humanity was wounded, broken, and burning with grief, and humanity would remember the last transmission from Earth. You've doomed yourselves. Part 2. The scattered children, the news of Earth's death, spread through the solar system like fire through dry grass. On Mars, people wept in the streets of their domed cities. On the moons of Jupiter and Saturn, workers stopped their machines and stared at their screens in disbelief. On distant asteroid stations, miners dropped their tools and gathered around flickering displays. 4 million. Humans lived beyond Earth. 4 million survivors who had watched their homeworld die from millions of miles away. They had seen the gray mist spread across the continents. They had heard the last desperate radio messages from cities going silent one by one. They had lost everything except their lives and their rage. Admiral Kate Sullivan was 53 years old. She had gray hair, sharp blue eyes, and a voice that could cut through steel. For 20 years, she had commanded the combined colonial fleet from Titan Station, a massive military base on Saturn's largest moon. She had always believed her job was to protect the colonies from pirates and criminals. She had never imagined she would become the leader of all humanity. 3 days after Earth went silent, Kate called a meeting of every surviving military commander. They gathered through Quantum Link, a technology that allowed instant communication across the vast distances of space. Their faces appeared on screens around Kate's command table, each one showing the same mix of grief and anger. "The Vel-3 believe we are dead," Kate said. Her voice was calm, but her hands were shaking. "They killed Earth and flew away without even checking if anyone survived. They think they have solved the human problem." Captain Dan Price spoke next. He was a young man who commanded the Mars Defense Force. His eyes were red from crying, but his jaw was set with determination. "My people are ready to fight. Just give us a target." "Fight with what?" asked Colonel Megan Torres. She was a small woman with dark hair and darker eyes. She commanded the asteroid belt installations, a network of mining stations and weapons platforms scattered among millions of rocks. "We have a few hundred ships. The Vel-3 have thousands. We saw what they did to Earth's military. Our fighters lasted maybe 10 minutes against them. Cannot win a direct fight," Kate agreed. "Not today. Maybe not for years. But we can survive. We can hide. And we can prepare." The room fell silent. Everyone understood what she was saying. This would not be a quick war. This would be a long game of patience and planning. They might not live to see victory, but their children might. Or their grandchildren. "The first step is to disappear," Kate continued. "We shut down every beacon, every transmission, every signal that could tell the galaxy we are still alive. We go completely dark. Vel-3 might come looking for us," Dawn warned. "They might, but they are arrogant. They looked at Earth and thought they saw all of humanity. They did not bother to check the rest of the solar system. They probably do not even know how many colonies we have or where they are located." Kate allowed herself a small, cold smile. "Their pride will be their weakness." Over the next few weeks, the survivors began their great vanishing act. Every radio station went silent. Every navigation beacon was turned off. Ships that had been visible to telescopes moved into the shadows of planets and moons. The colonies went dark. Dr. Laura Mitchell was among those who escaped Earth's moon before the Velthri could find them. She and a small team of scientists made it to Mars, where they joined the growing community of survivors. Her knowledge of alien biology would prove essential in the years to come. Ben Carter came with her. He had recorded every Velthri transmission he could find. He spent his days studying their language, their technology, their culture. The more he learned, the more he understood just how badly the aliens had underestimated humanity. "They call us primitives," Ben told Laura one evening. They sat in a small cafeteria on Mars, eating recycled food and drinking water that tasted like metal. "Their records say we only developed radio technology about 100 years ago. They think we are barely out of the caves. We landed on our moon 60 years after inventing the airplane," Laura said quietly. "We sent robots to Mars within decades. We built space stations and colonies while their reports were still being processed by their bureaucracy." Ben nodded. "They have no idea how fast we can move when we want to. They have been watching us, but they do not understand us." This was the truth that would shape everything that came next. The Velthri were ancient. Their civilization had existed for millions of years. They had spread across thousands of star systems. They had technology that seemed like magic to human eyes. But they were also slow. They thought in centuries and millennia. They made decisions through councils and committees that took decades to reach conclusions. Humanity thought in years and months. Humans made decisions in moments. When humans saw a problem, they did not form committees. They built solutions. When humans faced obstacles, they did not wait for permission. They found ways around. The Velthri had made their judgment based on 300 years of observation. In that time, humanity had gone from wooden ships to nuclear power, from horses to spacecraft, from simple tools to computers that could fit in a pocket. The aliens had seen this explosive growth and called it dangerous. They were right. But they had not understood just how dangerous. Kate Sullivan stood at her window and looked out at the stars. Somewhere among those distant points of light was the Velthri homeworld. Somewhere out there were the beings who had murdered 8 billion people without a second thought. "We will find you," she whispered to the darkness. "We will remember every name, every face, every child who never got to grow up, every parent who died protecting their family, every dream that was burned away." She turned away from the window and began to plan. The Velthri thought they had killed humanity. Instead, they had united humanity. They had given the scattered colonies a common enemy and a common purpose. They had forged the survivors into something new, something patient, something determined, something that would not stop until the debt was paid. The long silence had begun. The last. Transmission from Earth. You've doomed yourselves. Part 3. The Silent Decade 10. Years passed in darkness and determination. The survivors built their new world in the shadows of gas, giants, and the hollowed cores of asteroids. They worked without rest, driven by memories of a blue planet that would never be green again. Every day, they remembered. Every night they planned. Sam Grant was the chief engineer of the rebuilding effort. He was a big man with rough hands and a mind that could solve any problem. Before the attack, he had designed mining equipment for the asteroid belt. Now, he designed weapons of war. The first breakthrough came in the 3rd year. A Velthri scout ship had been captured during the initial attack, badly damaged, but mostly intact. Sam and his team worked on it day and night, taking it apart piece by piece, learning its secrets. "Their faster-than-light technology is beautiful," Sam admitted one day. He stood in his workshop on Titan Station, surrounded by alien components and human tools. It bends space itself. "A ship can travel 1,000 light-years in just a few hours. Can we copy it?" asked Kate Sullivan. The Admiral visited the workshop often. She needed to know everything about the enemy. "We already have." Sam smiled for the first time in months. "But that is not the best part. Their design is old. It works, but it is not efficient. Our engineers have found ways to improve it. Our version will be faster, use less power, and be harder to detect. This became the pattern of the next 7 years. Humanity did not just copy Velthari technology. They made it better. They took alien ideas and combined them with human creativity. The results were often surprising, even to the engineers who built them. Dr. Amy Lawson worked on a different kind of project. She was a geneticist, a scientist who studied the building blocks of life. Her mission was simple, but essential. Make sure humanity could never be attacked. The same way again. The Velthari weapon had targeted the basic chemistry of Earth's life forms. It had disrupted the tiny machines inside every cell, causing them to break down and fail. Amy spent years studying how it worked and how to stop it. "We cannot undo what happened to Earth," she told her team. They worked in a sealed laboratory deep beneath the surface of Mars. "But we can make sure it never happens again. We can change our own biology to resist these kinds of attacks." The treatments she developed were difficult and painful. They required months of recovery, but every survivor who received them became immune to biological weapons. Their children would be born with the same protection. Humanity was evolving itself, becoming stronger and harder to kill. Lisa Porter led the weapons development division. She had been a military designer before the attack, creating systems for the defense of Earth. Now, she created systems for its revenge. Her greatest invention was called the Swarm. It was a missile system, unlike anything the galaxy had seen. Instead of one large warhead, each swarm missile contained 10,000 tiny ones. When launched, they spread out like a cloud of angry insects. They could overwhelm any defense grid, find weak points in any shield, and destroy ships from the inside out. The Velthari rely on big, slow weapons, Lisa explained to the military council. She showed them simulations on a glowing screen. They expect their enemies to fight the same way. They have never faced anything like this. Each swarm unit thinks for itself. It finds targets, avoids obstacles, and communicates with other units. They cannot shoot them all down. There are simply too many. The children born during these years grew up in a strange world. They lived in underground cities and sealed stations. They had never felt rain on their faces or grass beneath their feet. But they knew these things from stories and recordings, passed down by parents and grandparents who remembered. Every child learned history, real history, not the sanitized versions that had been taught on Earth. They learned about every war humanity had ever fought, every victory and every defeat. They learned tactics and strategy. They learned how their ancestors had survived ice ages and plagues, tyrants and disasters. Most importantly, they learned why they were preparing. "We are not doing this for revenge," Kate Sullivan told them. She spoke to a gathering of young people on Mars, children who had been born after Earth died. "Revenge is empty. It does not bring back the dead. It does not heal our wounds." She paused and looked at their faces, so young and so serious. "We are doing this for justice. The Velthari murdered 8 billion innocent people. They did not warn us. They did not give us a chance to explain or change. They simply decided we were dangerous and killed us. That cannot be allowed to stand. Not because we want blood, but because the galaxy needs to know that such crimes have consequences." The young people understood. They had been raised on this truth. They carried it in their bones. By the 9th year, the hidden shipyards had produced a fleet of 1,000 warships. Each one was named after a city that had died on Earth: the New York, the Tokyo, the London, the Cairo, the Mumbai. Names that meant nothing to the enemy, but everything to the humans who crewed them. The ships were beautiful in a deadly way. They were smaller than Velthari vessels, but faster and more agile. They carried weapons that the enemy had never imagined. They were crewed by men and women who had spent a decade preparing for this moment. Admiral Kate Sullivan, now 63 years old, stood on the bridge of the flagship. It was called the New Chicago, named for the city where she had been born, where her parents had lived and died. "Right, 10 years, she said quietly. Ben Carter stood beside her, his red hair now streaked with gray. 10 years of silence. 10 years of work. 10 years of waiting. "The waiting is almost over," Ben replied. Kate nodded. Through the viewport, she could see the fleet assembling in the darkness between Jupiter's moons. 1,000 ships, 4 million survivors, and 8 billion ghosts demanding to be heard. Send the message, she ordered. Let them know we are coming. The last transmission from Earth. You've doomed yourselves, Part 4, the message. The transmission began at exactly midnight, measured by the time that had once been kept in a city called London, in a country called England. On a planet called Earth, it was the 10th anniversary of the day the gray mist had fallen. Commander Karras had recorded this message on the last day of his life. He had been on Earth during the attack, visiting family when the alien ships appeared. He had watched his wife and children grow sick and weak. He had held them as they died. Then, with nothing left to lose, he had made his way to the ruins of a broadcast station and recorded his final words. The message was simple. It was honest. It was the voice of a man who knew he was about to die and wanted the universe to remember. Ben Carter pressed the button that sent the transmission across the stars. It traveled faster than light itself, bouncing through relay stations that had been secretly placed during the decade of silence. Within hours, it would reach every corner of Velthury space. Within days, it would spread to the rest of the galaxy. On the Velthury homeworld, a planet called Veth Prime, life continued as it had for millions of years. The attack on Earth had been barely noticed by most citizens. It was a small operation, a minor pest control measure on the far edge of explored space. Few remembered it at all. High Counselor Szeth remembered. He was the one who had signed the order for the cleansing. He was very old, even by Velthury standards, and he had signed many such orders during his long career. The humans had been just another dangerous species, eliminated before they could become a real threat. Szeth was resting in his private chambers. When his assistant burst through the door, this was extremely unusual. Velthury servants never interrupted their masters without permission. High Counselor, the assistant said, his scales pale with fear. You need to see this immediately. Szeth followed his assistant to the communication center. Every screen showed the same image, a human face. The creature was clearly dying, its skin gray and its eyes filled with pain, but its voice was strong. This is humanity's final message to the Velthury and all who stood by while our world burned. Szeth felt something he had not felt in centuries. It took him a moment to recognize it as fear. You believed that by striking first, you would be safe. You believed that our aggression made us a threat. You were half right. The human coughed, and blood appeared at the corner of its mouth. But it continued speaking. We were never a threat to anyone who left us in peace. We would have been your greatest allies, your most loyal friends. We would have stood beside you against any darkness. We dreamed of meeting other intelligent life. We dreamed of learning from them and teaching them. We dreamed of friendship across the stars. Jack Harris paused to catch his breath. Behind him, through a broken window, the gray mist swirled through what had once been a beautiful city. But you chose to murder our children. You chose to poison our home. You chose to wipe us from existence without so much as a conversation. You did not ask us to change. You did not give us a chance to prove ourselves. You simply looked at our history and decided we were too dangerous to live. His voice grew harder, colder. So hear this, Velthury. Hear this, Galactic Council. Hear this, every species in every corner of this universe who watched our world burn and did nothing. Now Jack leaned closer to the camera. His eyes, even dimmed by approaching death, burned with a fire that transcended his dying body. We are not extinct. We survived in the places you did not bother to look. In the shadows of gas giants, in the hearts of asteroids, on moons you thought were worthless. In ships traveling between the stars, you've spent 10 years in silence. 10 years learning. 10 years building. 10 years remembering every face, every name, every dream that you stole from us. We are coming. You have doomed yourselves. The message ended. Across Velthury space, silence fell. Then the panic began. High Counselor Szeth immediately called an emergency session of the entire council. Representatives from every major Velthury world gathered within hours. They argued and shouted and blamed each other for the disaster. "How is this possible?" demanded one counselor. "We confirmed the extinction. We watched their planet die." "We watched their planet die," Zeth replied, his voice tired. "We did not watch their colonies. We did not even know how many colonies they had. We assumed they were primitive. We assumed their space presence was minimal. What do we do now?" No one had an answer. The Velthari military began preparing for war, but they were not truly worried. They had thousands of ships, millions of soldiers, technology far beyond what humans could possibly have developed. Whatever fleet the survivors had built, it could not possibly threaten the might of the Velthari Empire across the galaxy. Other species received the human message with mixed reactions. Some felt fear. Some felt curiosity. A few, those who had never liked the Velthari and their arrogant ways, felt something like hope. Perhaps these humans, these survivors of genocide, would finally challenge the order that had dominated the galaxy for so long. 1 week after the message was sent, the first human ships were spotted at the edge of Velthari space. Scout vessels, small and fast, appeared briefly on sensors, before vanishing again. The Velthari sent patrols to find them. The patrols never returned. 2 weeks after the message, Velthari outposts on the border began going silent. One by one, they stopped responding to communications. When rescue ships arrived, they found only debris and bodies. 3 weeks after the message, fear had spread through the entire empire. Citizens demanded protection. Military leaders promised victory. Politicians made speeches about the glory of the Velthari and the weakness of their enemies. But late at night, in quiet rooms, the leaders of the Velthari looked at each other with worried eyes. The humans were not supposed to be this advanced. They were not supposed to be this organized. They were not supposed to be winning. Admiral Kate Sullivan received reports of each successful strike with grim satisfaction. The main fleet was still hidden, waiting for the right moment. These were just probing attacks, meant to spread fear and confusion. The real battle had not yet begun. "Soon," she whispered, looking at a star map that showed the path to the Velthari homeworld. "Very soon, the last transmission from Earth. You've doomed yourselves, Part 5, The Reckoning." Human fleet emerged from the darkness like ghosts rising from a forgotten grave. 1,000 warships dropped out of faster-than-light travel, in perfect formation around Veth Prime, the Velthari homeworld. They appeared without warning, their engines silent. Their weapons ready, Captain Chris Vega stood on the bridge of the New Chicago. He was 32 years old, born on Mars 3 months after Earth died. He had never seen rain or felt wind on his face. He had never walked on grass or swum in an ocean, but he had trained his entire life for this moment. "All ships report ready," said his tactical officer, a woman named Grace Park. "The Velthari defense fleet is scrambling. Estimated time to engagement, 4 minutes. Right. Chris nodded. Beside him stood Dr. Laura Mitchell, now 71 years old. She had watched Earth die through a telescope on the moon. She had waited 3 decades to see this day. Her eyes were wet with tears, but her voice was steady. "We made it," she whispered. "We actually made it." The Velthari defense fleet was impressive. 2,000 warships, each one massive and powerful, arranged themselves between the human fleet and their homeworld. Their commanders were confident. They had numbers and firepower on their side. They had never lost a major battle in their entire history. That history was about to end. "All ships, this is Admiral Sullivan." Kate's voice came through the fleet-wide channel. At 73, she was too old for direct command of a vessel. But she watched from the command station on Titan, guiding the battle through Quantum Link. "Remember why we are here. Remember what they took from us. But also remember what we are fighting for. We fight for justice, not revenge. We fight to show the galaxy that genocide has consequences. Execute Battle Plan Alpha." The human ships moved like a single organism. They had trained together for years, developing tactics and strategies that the Velthari had never imagined. They did not charge straight at the enemy. Instead, they danced around them, striking from unexpected angles, using the planet's moons for cover. The Velthari fired their massive weapons, beams of energy that could destroy mountains. But the human ships were too fast, too agile. They slipped between the beams like fish swimming through water. And when they fired back, their weapons found their targets with deadly accuracy. Lisa Porter's swarm missiles proved devastating. Each missile released 10,000 tiny warheads that scattered in all directions. Velthari point defense systems, designed to stop large projectiles, could not track so many small targets. The swarms slipped through shields and armor, detonating inside enemy ships. One by one, Velthari warships began to die. Explosions lit up the darkness of space. Debris scattered in all directions. Within 30 minutes, half the defense fleet had been destroyed. Within an hour, only a handful of enemy ships remained. "Ceasefire," Kate ordered. "Let them surrender." The surviving Velthari ships lowered their weapons and broadcast signals of submission. They could not believe what had happened. They had been the most powerful fleet in the galaxy. Now they were broken and defeated by creatures they had dismissed as primitive. On the surface of Veth Prime, panic spread through the population. Citizens who had never known fear suddenly understood what it meant to be helpless. They looked up at the sky and saw human ships descending through the clouds. High Counselor Zeth stood in his chamber, watching the end of everything he had built. He was the last surviving member of the Council that had ordered Earth's destruction. The others had died of natural causes over the decades, never imagining that their decision would have consequences. "What do we do?" asked his assistant. Zeth did not answer. There was nothing to do. The humans had won, but the victory that followed was not what anyone expected. The human ships did not bomb cities. They did not release biological weapons. They did not repay genocide with genocide. Instead, they landed troops who captured government buildings without harming civilians. They arrested military leaders and politicians. They shut down weapons factories and military bases. Admiral Sullivan's voice echoed across the planet. "We are not you. We will not become what you made us fight against." The message spread through the galaxy faster than any fleet could travel. The humans had won. The mighty Velthari had been defeated, and the victors had chosen mercy over slaughter. On Veth Prime, Zeth was brought before a human tribunal. He expected torture, execution, perhaps something worse. Instead, he faced Dr. Laura Mitchell, who looked at him with eyes full of sadness rather than hatred. "You killed my world," she said quietly. "You killed 8 billion people. My parents, my friends, children who had never done anything wrong. You did this because you were afraid of what we might become." Zeth could not meet her eyes. "We thought we were protecting the galaxy. You were protecting yourselves from a threat that did not exist. We were not your enemies. We would have been your friends, but you never gave us the chance to prove it." The tribunal found Zeth and the other surviving leaders guilty of genocide. They were not executed. Instead, they were sentenced to spend the rest of their lives teaching Velthari children the true history of what their empire had done. They would live with their crimes until their last breath. The Velthari military was disbanded. Their war fleets were dismantled. Their weapons of mass destruction were destroyed. Human peacekeepers remained on their worlds for decades, ensuring that they could never again threaten another species. And across the galaxy, humanity sent a final message. We remember who helped. We remember who watched. We remember who cheered. Humanity is no longer alone in the dark, and we have a very long memory. Some species read this message with fear. Others read it with respect. A few, those who had secretly opposed the Velthari, read it with hope. Perhaps the galaxy was finally changing. Captain Chris Vega stood on the bridge of the New Chicago as the fleet prepared to return home. Dr. Laura Mitchell stood beside him, looking out at the stars. "What happens now?" he asked. Laura smiled, the first real smile she had allowed herself in 30 years. "Now we rebuild. Now we explore. Now we become what we were always meant to be, which is a people who survived the worst thing imaginable and came out the other side, still believing in mercy, justice, and hope." She turned to face him. The Velthari tried to extinguish a candle. Instead, they awakened a star. And that star will light the way for everyone, even for them. The fleet jumped to faster than light speed, carrying humanity toward a future that was finally full of possibility. The war was over. The healing could begin.